Levi Brackman here with Truth's Jewish Wisdom for today. Thank you so much for joining. I've had some technology problems this week, and therefore this is the third time I'm recording this. I'm just going to be super quick because I'm short on time. So this week's Torah portion is the Torah portion of Korach, where Korach led a mutiny against Moses and Aaron, and he wanted also to be a priest. And he basically said, why is it that you've given these plum jobs of the priesthood to your brother Aaron? Why is it that you haven't given us also that ability to be priests? We're all holy. We're all part of the nation of God. We should all be allowed also to be able to be priests. And that was the mutiny of Korach. Now, there are 3 times when God wanted to kill all the Israelites. The first time was last week's Torah portion of Shelach, when it talked about the spies, where the spies came back and they gave a negative report about the land of Israel, and the Israelites reacted to that and said they didn't want to go to the land of Israel. Instead, they wanted to go back to Egypt. And at that point, Moses fell on his face. God wanted to kill all the Israelites, and Moses made an argument to God that, no, please don't kill them. Actually, it's not in your best interest to kill them. Why? Because if you do that, the nations of the world will say that the reason why you killed them in the desert was because you didn't have the power to actually fulfill your promise of taking them to the land of Israel, and that's why you end up killing them in the desert. So that's the first point. Note that when did Moses fall on his face? He fell on his face as a reaction to the fact that the Israelites wanted to go back to Egypt. Moses, he fell on his face, and the idea of falling on your face is, it seems, out of despair. Some people say it was praying, but to me it seems the falling on the face is the idea of despair. Out of such despair, the Israelites who came out of the land of Egypt now wanted to give up the whole enterprise and return to Egypt rather than press on forward, going to the land of Israel. He knew how much that would anger God, and indeed that's what happened. Therefore, he was despair. He fell on his face. And true to form, God wanted to kill all of the Israelites, and Moses was able to talk him out of that. The second time God wanted to kill all the Israelites was the story of Korach. And Korach came and he made his complaint, and Moses felt despair out of that, and he fell on his face, as is found in chapter 16, verse 4. Then what happened as a result of that? God wanted to kill all the Israelites, and at that point, God tells Moses, and he says, you should keep away and get out away from all this people so that I can consume them and kill them within a second, within a split moment. And at that point, again, Moses falls on his face. There's despair from Moses at God that God wants to kill them all. And he makes an argument to God, and he says as follows. He says, 1 second, one of the people rebels and you want to kill everyone? Is this the Lord of the spirits of all flesh? Is this how he should behave? Again, calling to God's greater glory and saying that the Lord of the spirit of all flesh should not behave this way, and he's able to talk God out of doing this. And then the third time, after many of the Israelites are killed, and the Korach is killed, and his people are killed, and Dathan and Abiram are killed, the people again get upset with Moses and Aaron, and they say, why have you killed the people of the Lord? And again, God gets very angry, and he tells Moses and Aaron that he's going to kill them right away, and he's going to put them all to death. And again, Moses falls on his face, but this time he doesn't make an argument to God to tell him not to do it. He sends out Aaron with the ketores, with the incense, in order to be able to get rid of the plague that was immediately to come because of God's anger. What's interesting here is that you find this despair of Moses not only at the children of Israel for their behavior, but also at God for his behavior. And we find that the first time, Moses isn't despairing of it. He doesn't fall on his face when God says he wants to kill them all. He understands it. God's going to be upset. He gets that. And then he makes an argument to God and tries to inspire God's greatness, his kindness, erech apayim, slow to anger, rav chesed, and one who's plentiful in mercy and kindness. This is the God which Moses wants to inspire God to be at that moment, and he successfully does that, and God does not want to kill them. But Moses isn't despairing at God for wanting to kill all the people the first time. The second time, Moses does despair, and he falls on his face, and he makes an argument to God and says to God, this is not in your best interest again to do this. This, the God who's a spirit of all flesh, this is not the way that kind of God should behave, and he's able to talk him out of it, and God doesn't kill all the people. The third time, though, again there's despair, but there's no talking God out of it. Again, Moses has to take action. In a sense, Moses realizes that I've spoken to God, and I've inspired God to behave in a greater way twice. There's no more talking. I have to go and do action and stop God from behaving in this way. What's really interesting here is Moses is dealing on both sides with this. On the one side, he's dealing with the people and their negative behavior. On the other side, he's dealing with an overreactive God. And in both of these, Moses stuck in the middle, falling on his face in despair each and every time. What one finds here, though, really interesting and instructive is how one might learn from Moses and how to deal with very difficult counterparties. And just to point out two things in how he overcomes God and makes those arguments. The first thing he says is, God, this is not in your best interest. This is a bad PR move for you to kill all the people. Why? Because that which you yourself want, you want all the people to be taken into the land of Israel, to show that you have this power to take them out of Egypt all the way to the land of Israel. If you don't end up doing that, it's not going to look good for you. That greatness that you want to show the world is just not going to come to fruition, and therefore don't do it. The second argument he makes is similar to the argument which Abraham made when God wanted to kill all the people of Sodom and Gomorrah. He said, 1 second, the Shofet Kol Haaretz, the judge of all the land, Noyas and Mishpat, not doing justice, that is an untenable situation, and therefore it can't be that you would kill the righteous with the wicked together, and therefore you should save Sodom and Gomorrah on account of the righteous that might exist there. That was an argument which was made. Similarly, Moses is making the argument that 1 second, you've got a few people who've sinned, you can't kill everyone for that. That isn't a just God. A God of justice wouldn't do that. The Lord, who's the Lord of the spirit of all flesh, ought to know all people. Can't just kill all people indiscriminately. He only should punish those which have been culpable of the act, and that seems to work. But the idea here is also to say to God, this isn't in your best interest. This isn't a God of a spirit of all flesh would not behave in this way. And the rhetorical question, how could you, one person, sin and be angry upon everyone? That is beyond you. That is beneath you to behave in that way. And if you have counterparties who want to do something which seems to you that is going to be negative for the other counterparty, again, Moses in the middle here, he's mediating this. You want to tell one counterparty, this isn't in your best interest to behave this way. This is not going to get you to where you actually want to get to. Take a different course of action, and you're much more likely to be successful in getting where you want to get to. Now, there's much more to this that I wanted to discuss, and I wanted to go through all the different verses in detail. But again, unfortunately, I had some technical difficulties. This is the third time I'm recording this, so therefore I did a shortened version of this thought that I've had on the Torah portion. But here it's really interesting how you see that this idea of falling on your face is really, although some people think it's praying, to me it really seems clear that this is despair in some sense. Moses is having to deal with two counterparties which are both seeming unreasonable and reactive rather than acting in a rational manner. But Moses is able to deal with it. Yes, he's despairing of it. And eventually, what's really interesting is he gives up trying to argue with God. He realizes God constantly is reacting in exactly the same way. So he gives up trying to react to God and takes, instead of talking, yes, he has the same reaction of despair. He falls on his face. But instead of talking, he takes action and sends Aaron out to put down the plague with the incense. And that works. This is just a really interesting sequence of events. One doesn't think of God as being reactive. And the way the narrative in the Torah looks at God, it's really interesting to get into the mind of the Torah to understand how it views God. And I'll leave the conclusions to be drawn by the listener or the reader of the Torah. Really fascinating stuff. Thank you so much for listening. This has been Levi Brackman with Truth, Jewish Wisdom for Today, the Torah portion uncensored part of my podcast. And until next time.